The vaulted hall shimmered under the glow of crystal chandeliers, each droplet refracting the violet light into a haze that seemed more for spectacle than illumination. The air was heavy with the scent of spiced vapors wafting from the alien incense burners along the walls. Layers of silk-draped banners hung above the assembly, each bearing the jagged crest of the house Jar, a reminder that this was not a place where humans were meant to feel welcome. Commander Rylan Voss stood at the center of the marbled floor, boots planted in the geometric patterns carved into the stone centuries before humanity had learned to split the atom. Every eye in the chamber weighed on him, slitted, multifaceted, or softly luminescent. The laughter here was never kind, the silences never neutral. He'd learned that during the first year of his reluctant service in this empire. At the far end of the hall, on a throne carved from a single block of obsidian shot through with veins of pale blue ore, sat Baron Vorel Jar. His towering frame was draped in armor that seemed grown rather than forged, each overlapping scale alive with shifting iridescence. His long fingers tapped against the armrest in a slow rhythm, a gesture that in his species carried the same weight as a smile in a predator's gaze. The chamber quieted when he rose. "Commander Voss," Vorel began, his voice carrying the low resonance of a bass note that lingered in the bones, "I have been pondering the nature of humans." His tone suggested the word was interchangeable with curiosities or parasites. So ambitious, so hungry for recognition, yet so fragile. "I have decided to test you." A ripple of amusement spread among the nobles flanking the throne. Their garments shimmered with the glint of metallic threads and feathers from creatures Rylan had never seen alive. Each noble leaned forward, eager to witness whatever humiliation their baron had planned. Two attendants entered from a side door, pushing a grave chair. The figure within it appeared almost insubstantial at first, a slight frame wrapped in pale, soft garments, hands resting motionless on the armrests. Her eyes, though, caught the light with an alertness that didn't belong to someone entirely broken. The chair stopped before the baron, and one of the attendants adjusted its position so the girl faced the audience. "My daughter, Karin," Vorel announced, the name spilling from his mouth as though it were a defect he could not quite spit out. "She cannot walk, cannot fight, cannot carry the honor of my bloodline. The physicians assure me her condition is beyond even our art." But, he paused, letting the crowd lean into the silence. "Perhaps she will serve some use as a gift to you." The laughter was immediate. Some nobles hissed in the clicking cadence of their language, others leaned toward one another to whisper jests. One alien woman covered her mouth as though to conceal a smile, but her eyes gleamed with cruelty. Rylan did not move for a moment. His training told him this was a provocation meant to test the limits of his pride. His gut told him it was also a trap. Accepting meant inviting mockery for the rest of his service, refusing could be taken as an insult to the baron's generosity. He stepped forward, allowing the weight of his boots to echo through the hall, and inclined his head. "I accept the charge, Baron Jar," he said, voice even. "If your daughter is now under my care, she will want for nothing." The baron's smile was slow and deliberate, as though he had extracted exactly the reaction he wanted. "Then she is yours, Commander. Do keep her entertained." As the laughter swelled again, Rylan approached the grave chair. Karin's gaze met his, steady and unflinching, and for the briefest instant he saw something that did not belong to a discarded pawn, something sharp, calculating. The moment passed as she let her eyes drift toward the floor, playing the part she had likely been forced into for years. He guided the grave chair toward the exit, the murmur of mocking voices following them like a tailwind. The hall's great doors sealed behind them with a deep, resonant thud. The corridor beyond was quieter, lined with tall, narrow windows that looked out over the mining city below. Massive excavators crawled over the surface, their lights flickering in the thin atmosphere. Rylan kept his pace steady, conscious that the hall's watchers might still be lingering in their minds, measuring every movement for weakness. After several minutes, a voice broke the silence, low but carrying an unmistakable clarity. "You didn't flinch." Rylan glanced down at her. "Would you rather I had?" "No," she said, the corner of her mouth lifting almost imperceptibly. "Flinching is exactly what they expected." Her tone was unhurried, but each word seemed deliberate. He had known officers with the same quality, people who could slice through bluster with a single observation. "You've been in that hall often?" he asked. "Too often. Long enough to know that the moment you show them your pride can be bent, you are theirs forever. And you," her eyes sharpened on him. "You didn't look at me like they do." "Like what?" "Like I'm already dead." He didn't answer. It was too early to trust what this conversation might become. Instead, he turned the chair into a smaller, well-lit chamber that had been hastily prepared for her arrival. It was nothing lavish, just a sleeping platform, a work desk, and a large viewport overlooking the landing platforms where transports came and went. He stopped the grave chair near the viewport. "You'll have this view as long as you're here," he said. She studied the transports beyond the glass, her expression unreadable. "What will you do with me?" "I'll do what I was told," he said evenly. "You're under my care now. That means you'll be safe." Her gaze flicked back to him, measuring. "You sound like a soldier who still thinks he's in command of something." "Maybe I am." The silence stretched again, but this time it was less brittle. She seemed to be weighing him as he was weighing her, and neither was ready to declare what they had decided. From somewhere in the distance, the muffled roar of engines echoed through the structure. A transport was lifting off, its lights cutting through the haze outside. Karen watched it until it disappeared into the violet clouds. When she finally spoke, her voice was quieter, but the edge remained. "If you think you can keep me safe in this place, you're either a fool, or the only man here worth my time." Rylan let the words hang between them before replying. "I've been called worse than a fool. We'll see which I am." Outside, the clouds shifted, revealing a brief glimpse of the pale star that lit this world. In that light, Karen's eyes seemed to catch fire for the briefest instant, and Rylan had the uneasy feeling that the so-called gift he'd been handed might turn out to be far more dangerous than the Baron intended. The first days passed in a tense rhythm, each of them quietly gauging the other. Rylan kept his schedule precise, a soldier's habit that neither the alien nobility's contempt nor the years of unwanted service had managed to erode. He ensured Karen's quarters remained secure, her meals prompt, and her attendants carefully chosen from those least likely to report every detail back to the Baron. She observed all of it in silence, never once asking for indulgence or decoration. On the fourth morning, he found her by the viewport, watching the movement of cargo skiffs as they wove between the landing pads. She did not turn when he entered, only gestured slightly with her chin toward a transport idling near the western platform. Its cargo hatches were open, revealing racks of heavy mining drills. "That ship has been here for 3 days," she said, her voice calm but precise. "Jar cargo runs never linger this long unless there's an inspection. That means one of two things: the drills are defective, or they're being reassigned to another operation." Rylan studied the vessel. "And you care because?" She turned her head toward him, the faintest trace of a smirk in her expression. "Because your Baron won't tell you what he's preparing for." "He certainly won't tell me. But ships leave patterns. If I can read them, so can anyone with a reason to take this moon." It was the first time she had volunteered anything beyond surface conversation, and he recognized the opening for what it was. He pulled a chair closer to her, lowering his voice. "What else have you noticed?" Her eyes lit briefly, as though the question was permission she had been waiting for. 3 nights ago, 2 of Drazketha's scouts passed within the outer patrol grid. They stayed just long enough to map the defense beacons, then slipped away. "If you think they were joyriding, you're wrong. They were planning." He knew the name. Lord Drazketh had a reputation for stripping worlds bare, leaving only husks in his wake. The fact his scouts had been here without sparking a full military response told Rylan more about Baron Jar's priorities than the Baron would ever admit aloud. "Why didn't you tell anyone?" he asked. "I did," she replied evenly. "My father smiled and reminded me that worrying about war was unbecoming for a cripple." The word left her mouth like a shard of glass, not self-pity but contempt. "He prefers to pretend his enemies are too frightened to strike." Rylan leaned back, weighing her words. He had suspected for months that Jar's confidence was built more on intimidation than readiness. If Drazketh truly intended to move, the mining operations here would be the first to fall. By the end of the week, their conversations had shifted. She no longer waited for him to ask questions, she offered observations, analyses, and predictions with the same steady calm. He began bringing her datapads loaded with shipping manifests, patrol routes, and sensor logs, some procured through official channels, others quietly pulled from systems that JAR's overseers barely monitored. She devoured them with an intensity that reminded him of seasoned tacticians studying a battlefield map. One evening, as the pale star sank below the horizon and the mining fields darkened, she pushed a datapad toward him. "You've been thinking like them," she said, "and that's your mistake. You're assuming they'll fight you on your terms." "I'm not assuming anything," he replied. "I'm preparing for what we can realistically counter." Her eyes narrowed. "Realistic is how they've kept you small. You need to think like a species that survived by being outnumbered and outgunned. Isn't that what humans are supposed to be good at?" He didn't answer right away. The truth was, she was right. His years in alien service had worn down the part of him that once thrived on impossible odds. He had been careful for so long, trying to avoid drawing the wrong kind of attention, that he'd almost forgotten how to think like a soldier who planned to win. The shift began with an idea he'd been turning over since their first conversation: mobility. The moon's defense grid relied almost entirely on fixed installations, surface turrets, static missile batteries, and orbital platforms too slow to reposition in time against a surprise assault. If those could be bypassed, the planet was exposed. Karen proposed using the mining drones, hundreds of them, spread across the surface as improvised attack units. Outfitted with magnetic explosives and simple navigational programming, they could swarm enemy ships in the debris fields where larger vessels had to slow. It was audacious, almost absurd. It was also exactly the kind of thinking that could tilt the odds. They began working in secret. Rylan called in favors from human engineers scattered across the Baron's holdings, men who owed him for past interventions or simply wanted to see a human make the aliens sweat. The modifications were small enough to avoid detection at first: reinforced chassis, altered sensor packages, reprogrammed navigational software. Karen coordinated every detail from her grave chair, her fingers dancing over the Neuralink interface he had installed for her. The first time she tested it, her posture shifted almost imperceptibly, shoulders tightening, gaze sharpening like a pilot slipping into a familiar cockpit. For a moment, he forgot entirely that she could not stand. One night, as the workshop lights cast long shadows over the walls, he caught her watching him. "What?" he asked. "You don't look at me like I'm breakable," she said. "I'm not sure if that's recklessness or something else." "Probably both," he admitted. The preparations accelerated when news arrived that 2 more of Drazketha's ships had been sighted on the edge of the system. Officially, they were traders. Unofficially, every experienced officer knew a reconnaissance sweep when they saw one. The Baron still made no move to reinforce the fleet. Karen's frustration boiled over. He's going to wait until they're in orbit before admitting there's a threat. By then, half the mines will be slag. Rylan studied the tactical projections she had assembled. "Then we move before he can stop us." It was a dangerous decision. Acting without authorization could mean court-martial, imprisonment, or worse. But it was also the only way to test their defenses before the enemy did. They initiated the first phase on a moonless night, under the cover of routine maintenance. The modified drones were deployed in small clusters, drifting silently into the orbital debris fields. Their communications were shielded, their signatures masked to blend with the mining clutter. Karen's voice over the comm was steady as she directed them into position. "Cluster 3, adjust course by 2 degrees. Cluster 5, hold at waypoint and power down. We'll wake you when they're close enough to taste your breath." Her precision was surgical, her awareness of the battlefield uncanny. Rylan realized she was not merely directing machines, she was shaping the engagement before it even began. By dawn, the first phase was complete. No alarms had been triggered, no questions asked. The Baron's intelligence officers remained blissfully ignorant. That morning, as the mining city stirred to life, Rylan stood beside her at the viewport. The debris fields glimmered faintly in the early light, their hidden teeth waiting for the first fool to drift too close. "He'll know soon enough," he said quietly. "He'll know when it's too late to stop it," she replied. Her confidence was not arrogance. It was the calm certainty of someone who had lived her entire life underestimated and was about to make that mistake fatal for someone else. For the first time since he'd been given this so-called gift, Rylan felt the balance shift. The Baron might believe he had handed a human a burden meant to shame him, but what he had truly done was arm that human with a mind capable of turning a joke into a weapon. When the alert came, it would be the first move in a game that neither the Baron nor Drazketh had realized they were already losing. The alarm cut through the early silence like a blade. It began as a low, resonant pulse, rising into a steady rhythm that carried urgency into every corridor of the fortress. Rylan was already moving before the comm panel on his wall flickered to life, projecting a tactical overlay of the system. Red markers bled across the screen, an incoming fleet, larger than the defense grid could counter in any conventional fight. Karen's voice came through the private channel he had set aside for her. Outer sensors confirm. 6 cruisers, 2 carriers, and a flagship on approach. That's just the lead formation. They'll be in high orbit within an hour. He was already pulling on his armor. Drazketha's not wasting time. And your Baron is still pretending he's in control, she replied, the edge in her tone sharper than he had heard before. His orders are to assemble the fleet in parade formation and wait for them to come to us. We do that, we're finished. I'm not following his orders, Rylan said. And neither are you. When he reached her quarters, she was already locked into the Neuralink rig they had installed, the grave chair surrounded by a cocoon of tactical displays. Her gaze was fixed on the incoming formation, her fingers moving with controlled precision. They're holding their formation tight, she said without looking at him. It means they're confident. Overconfident. He scanned the projections. They don't know what's sitting in those debris fields. Her mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. Then let's educate them. Orders went out through back channels, bypassing the Baron's command structure entirely. Human and alien crews who had been quietly drawn into Rylan's circle moved into position. The modified mining drones, dormant for weeks, came to life one by one. Their thrusters lit faintly, masked against the glare of the system's pale star, and they began to drift into intercept paths. The enemy fleet entered the outer belt without slowing. On the central display, the ships moved like blades sliding into a sheath, their course unwavering. Karen's voice was calm. Cluster 3, engage. Out in the cold black, a dozen drones accelerated from their hiding places, small and unassuming against the hulking cruisers. The first wave struck without warning, magnetic charges clamping onto hulls before detonating in synchronized bursts. 2 cruisers reeled from the impact, their formation faltering just enough to open a gap. Rylan seized the moment. Cluster 5, now. The second swarm poured through the breach, targeting engine arrays and weapons emplacements. Debris blossomed into the void, and for the first time the enemy slowed, unsure of what they had stumbled into. In the command chamber, Karen's focus was absolute. She anticipated each shift in enemy movement, adjusting drone paths before Rylan could even speak. Her voice carried no hesitation, only the certainty of someone who had already seen the battle's shape in her mind. They're scanning for control signals, she said. I'm routing commands through decoy relays. They'll waste minutes chasing ghosts. The Baron's official fleet, still holding in ceremonial formation, was finally forced to move when the enemy flagship advanced through the chaos. Rylan ignored the calls demanding his compliance. He was too deep in the fight now to spare words for politics. The enemy adjusted, pulling back damaged ships while pushing the carriers forward. Swarms of smaller craft poured out, angling to flank the fortress. Time for the fallback line, Karen said. Rylan keyed the order. Ground-based artillery emplacements powered up, their targeting systems already locked from pre-battle calibrations. Precision fire rained down, catching the enemy's lighter craft as they skirted the defense grid. The air outside the fortress shimmered with the glow of shield impacts and the flare of detonations. But the enemy flagship kept coming. It was a vast, angular predator, its hull blacker than the void around it, bristling with weapon ports. They'll try to breach from low orbit, Rylan said. Straight through the mining fields. That's where they die, Karen answered. The final wave of drones surged forward, this time in a concentrated mass aimed directly at the flagship's projected path. The enemy captain, perhaps realizing the danger, tried to angle the ship upward, but the debris field's gravitational drift was against him. The drones closed in from all sides, their charges detonating in overlapping bursts that tore through shields and bit into armor. For a moment, the flagship seemed to hold, its massive frame absorbing punishment that would have shredded anything smaller. Then one of its engine clusters ruptured, venting fire and shrapnel into space. The ship began to list, its course dragging it deeper into the planet's pull. Karen didn't look away from the display. Gravity will finish what we started. The enemy fleet broke formation entirely. Damaged ships limped toward the system's edge, while the remaining cruisers scrambled to cover their retreat. The flagship descended in a slow, helpless arc, vanishing into the upper atmosphere where a bloom of fire marked its end. Inside the fortress, the battle screens filled with static as the last enemy signals faded. The official report from the Baron's command came minutes later, full of self-congratulation and thinly veiled dismissal of the tactics that had actually won the fight. Rylan ignored it. Karen leaned back in her chair, the light from the displays casting her face in stark relief. There was no triumph there, only a deep, steady satisfaction. "You know this isn't over," she said. "Drazketh won't let this stand. And my father won't forgive either of us for making him look small." Rylan nodded. "Then we prepare for the next fight."